Hello, Define Nation, and welcome to another episode of Define Your Health with Danielle Girdano, Strength through Knowledge. And I am such an advocate of having knowledge and being empowered by that knowledge. And today's show is definitely going to just raise that standard to a new bar. Our guest today is going to be Amiee Shuuny, who is a doctor, really at the pinnacle of excellence when it comes to naturopathic medicine. She's been practicing in California for 14 years. She truly is an expert in women's health. She's an educator. She's a writer. So again, Amiee, thank you so much for joining us and joining Define Nation.
Well, thank you. I'm really very excited to be here. I hear wonderful things about you guys.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad that we translate across the miles. So California is one of my most favorite states, so that's awesome. So today we're really going to be talking about omegas. And, you know, I'm sure, as you know, this is one of those topics where there seems to be a lot of gray area. There's a lot of confusion. And, you know, I like Define Nation to be well equipped with good information. So let's just dive right in. Omega-3s, one of the most popular omegas that people talk about. Really break it down for our listeners. You know, what exactly are these and why are they so important for the human body to have?
Sure. I mean, this is a great point, and it's something everybody should understand because it's something that we all have access to, and it's important for every single one of us and every member of our family, including the animal members of our family. So this is something that everybody can kind of get on board with together. Basically, omega-3s are essential fats, and what that means is that they are essential. We don't make them. We have to get them from our food. And the reason that they are so very important is because they are literally the foundation of the health of every cell in your body. If you think about your body with billions of cells, every cell has a cell membrane, and that cell membrane is made up of fats. And the fats that are in that membrane are dictated by the fats that you eat. And the function of that membrane, which of course is getting all the good stuff, the nutrition, the blood cells, and oxygen from the red blood cells, into the cells, and getting all the waste and the debris out. That's what a good functioning cell membrane does. And how well it does that, or how poorly it does that, is going to be based on the fats that you eat. So you really need to be getting plenty of your essential fatty acids in order for those cell membranes to be working well. And your omega-3s is one of the most crucial ways that you can do that. So you can see, when you look at it from that perspective, why omega-3s are so important for every system of your body. It's really because they are crucial to the cell membrane of every cell of your body.
Well, you know, and I think, you know, fats in particular are kind of where carbohydrates were, you know, 10 or 15 years ago. I mean, you know, or where carbohydrates, are today, where fats were 10 or 15 years ago. You know, if you remember, you know, the famous Susan Powers, maybe more for her hairdo than anything else, but she was very anti-fat. You know, do you remember? She was, you know, fat is awful, fat is terrible. And, you know, then these, you know, companies started coming out with all these grossly produced and processed you know, food-like substances, maybe are a better way to say it, that it didn't have any fat, but it had all these chemicals and all these additives and, you know, and all these things in, and we really lost these essential fats that are so important for so many different things, including, you know, like you said, you know, the cell membranes, talking about when you form new muscle tissue or just the maintenance of those cells. You know, fats are so important, you know, even hormone function and development as well, too.
Exactly. And I don't know if you and I are a similar age, but, you know, for me, that time of the fat-free foods, of the Snackwell fat-free pound cake, I don't know if you remember that.
I do. I was in junior high school. I do.
Okay, so I'm a little older than you. I was in college, and we ate everything was fat-free. It was Snackwell. It was fat-free yogurt, and, you know, I was never fatter. I mean, it was because that food, like you said, is so high in sugar and so high in chemicals. Fat plays such a very, very important role in, you know, we're going to talk about not only heart disease and insulin resistance and blood sugar stability, weight management, mood, all of those things. And when we deprive ourselves of fat, we see really large health problems. So the reason that omega-3s, part of it is that, yes, we are coming back to recognize that it is important to have adequate, good quality fat in our diet, and part of it is really the discovery over the last couple decades, or the predominance over the last couple decades, about how important these essential fats, the ones that we have to get from our food that we don't make, like the omega-3s. Of course, the other thing about the omega-3s that we've learned is, in addition to them being extremely important for cell membrane function, they have very important anti-inflammatory effects in the body.
Yes.
And what we've learned over the last decade is that chronic inflammation is at the root cause of all chronic disease. So, not only is this helping with cellular function and with function throughout the body, but it's also helping us reduce our risk for chronic disease by fighting chronic inflammation with food.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's another point that I'd like to clarify right before we go to break here is, most people talk about omega-3, 6s, and 9s. And, omega-9s are just rampant in the American diet. We certainly don't need those. And, the function between omega-6s and omega-3s, they kind of need one another. Not that they need one another, but they help each other function. But primarily with the omega-3s that are the most important for people to be getting into their diet is the EPA and the DHA. Can you spend just a second clarifying what each one of those are, the EPA and the DHA, excuse me.
Yeah, no, I know. It's all these acronyms can make you crazy, right? Yeah. EPA and DHA are both long-chain omega-3 essential fats. And when you get your omega-3s from plant sources like flax and walnuts and chia and different foods like that, you get the short-chain omega-3 fat. And the hope is that you convert it downstream to the long-chain EPA and DHA. But as it turns out, we don't do that so well, which is why we focus on needing to get specifically EPA and DHA. We used to say the EPA is the one that's good for your heart and the DHA is the one that's good for your brain. And to be honest with you, Danielle, the more and more research that comes out, the more we realize that what we really need is a therapeutic dose of both of them combined. But the bad news is we can't really rely on plant source for this. So we've got to get our EPA and DHA preformed in fish or algae, which of course is what the fish eat,
yes.
Or we could do a fish oil or algae oil supplement. So that's where you have to go to get those.
Well, and absolutely. And on that note, we are going to cut away to our first commercial break. Define Nation, hang on tight. We will be right back with Dr. Amiee Shuuny.
Considering a career change? The Cooper Institute offers education, training, and job opportunities to fitness lovers like you every month. Visit our website, cooperinstitute.org, or call 972-341-3200 today. cooperinstitute.org or 972-341-3200.
Hi, this is Lisa Carmen with Sacred Sexy You and the Burlesque Experience. I believe a woman in love with herself heals the world. If you want to experience deeper healing, deeper love, a deeper sense of self-connection and self-devotion, join me for an adventure of a lifetime. Go to sacredsexyu.com, that's the letter U, or theburlesqueexperience.com, and see what happens when you start living from the inside out.
And welcome back, Define Nation. We are talking with Dr. Amiee Shuuny, and she is really the leading expert in women's health in the United States. Such a pleasure to have you on the show. And we were just diving into the difference between EPA and DHA fats and why they are so essential in the human body. And as you were saying, we've heard a lot about the EPA with cardiovascular support, but really what are the other benefits when it does come to the EPA and the DHA working together?
Sure. So, if you think about it from the perspective of inflammation, like I brought up earlier, when I was in school, 15, 17 years ago, we talked about how inflammation was at the root cause of all chronic disease. And, in the last 10 to 15 years, this has actually become a mainstreamed idea. When I was in naturopathic integrative medical school, people would just raise your eyebrow when you said that. But now it is very well accepted that there is an inflammatory cause to heart disease, to diabetes, to many of the most common cancers. And, those are the top 3 killers in the country, right? Heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. Not to mention there's an inflammatory component to depression and anxiety. There's an inflammatory component to allergies, to asthma, to cognitive dysfunction, including Alzheimer's disease, and the list goes on. So when you look at it from that perspective, and then you look at the omega-3s and you understand that when you eat an omega-3 fat, it travels downstream in your body and gets turned into anti-inflammatory chemicals in the body, you can start to understand why the omega-3s, they're good for your heart. Yes, they're good for your brain, but they're good for allergies. They're good for asthma. They're good for attention and focus and cognition as we decline, possibly even Alzheimer's disease. It's important for insulin resistance, so it can help with diabetes and weight management. It's just the reason that it's so easy to talk about fish oil, the reason why I spend so much time doing it and recommending it to my patients is because it is something that is of value really to most of us. In my head, it's a womb-to-tomb proposition, and that is largely related to its anti-inflammatory properties because inflammation is such a far-reaching health issue for us.
Well, and and I love the way that you just coined that phrase, womb to tomb, and we're going to talk about specifically cognitive development in children and why getting these fats for children are so important. But to digress for a second, we just did a show a few weeks ago with the founder of the Alzheimer's Cure Foundation, and one of the reasons why I am so adamant, even though I am a vegan, that I take my DHA fats and I get my fish oil in is because I'm aware that Alzheimer's disease and cognitive dementias are in my family history, and I understand that these things have a possibility of affecting me in the future, and why I'm so passionate that people get these in, and that when you're diagnosed with these type of disorders, one, it's not a death sentence, and there are things that you can do, to try and, how can we say, preserve the amount of function that someone has at the time. But even more so, being aware that these things can be preventable if you get ahead of these curveballs and you simply give the body what it needs to function. And maybe if you can elaborate a little bit too about giving the body something it needs to function versus putting a Band-Aid over top of things. And I am very much a holistic minded person. I preach it. I'm very passionate about it, where, a lot of times big pharma will put a Band-Aid over things. And, now, one of the biggest crazes is, pharmaceutical grade fish oil, or what they call pharmaceutical grade, fish oil, which in at least the cases that I've seen are synthetics. And so maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on the Alzheimer's and about those synthetic sources versus natural sources.
Sure. So there are a whole bunch of really good questions in there. I think the first, so help keep me on track. But the first one I want to grab is this concept of, if you look at something like metabolic syndrome, which is epidemic in this country, in order to be diagnosed as metabolic syndrome, you're going to have some constellation of symptoms that will usually include elevated blood sugar, elevated lipids or cholesterol, and elevated blood pressure. Often there's obesity that accompanies that as well. Mm-hmm. And when somebody has metabolic syndrome, even if it's you're in a pre-diabetic state, or you kind of have hypertension, you're moving in that direction, you are greatly increasing your risk for developing heart disease and diabetes in the future. And this is an epidemic in this country. Now, from a conventional medical perspective, the way that metabolic syndrome is managed and treated is by giving different drugs to treat the different symptoms. So we give a statin for the cholesterol. We might give metformin for an imbalanced blood sugar, or insulin. If there's an insulin issue, we might give something to lower the blood pressure, etc. And while all of those things, could potentially have an important place in somebody's treatment protocol, what we don't have in big pharma is recognizing that there is something that's underlying all of metabolic syndrome, all of these conditions, that's created like a metabolic derangement in how the body functions, which is why we're seeing it manifest the way that it does. You take something like fish oil with its anti-inflammatory properties, and it is an underlying foundational treatment for metabolic syndrome, because instead of just addressing a symptom, it actually gets underneath and gets at the cause. Mm-hmm. So, to me, it's a global treatment, which is wonderful, which is why pharmaceutical companies have come out with, a prescription fish oil. Some of these prescription fish oils are, they're the proper dosing. My biggest complaint with them would be that most of them are in the ethyl ester form, which I think is what you're referring to when you say synthetic.
Yes.
And, the ethyl ester form, we have a lot of studies that show that there is benefit to taking ethyl esters in fish oils in that form. But we also have adequate studies that show that the reesterified triglyceride form, if you're taking concentrated fish oil, or just the natural triglyceride form as it's found in fish, is actually much more bioavailable for people, and they're much more able to absorb it, and it increases the amount of omega-3s in the tissue faster. I certainly appreciate that the pharmaceutical industry is trying to jump on board and be able to give people something that can actually help the underlying cause and not just treat the symptoms, but I'm not sure that it's always the best choice.
And I have to agree with you on that. And and again, I'm so passionate about getting things from actual food and trying to get things as much as you can from actual food. I think we've become such a supplement and such a pharma-based society that we really need to investigate which ones, are the good ones and try and separate those. And we are going to get into that in the next segment. Right now, Define Nation, we need to cut away to Chef Vivian James in the Cooking Corner, but we will be right back with our special guest, Dr. Shuuny from California.
Hi, this is Vivian James with the Cooking Corner. The Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, what's the difference? Well, the Dirty Dozens are foods that have the highest level of toxic organ phosphate insecticides. Clean 15 are foods that have the lowest levels of pesticides and are safe to buy non-organic. Buying organic is one of the ways we ensure we are eating clean, non-genetically modified, nutrient-dense food. In fact, we can reduce our pesticide exposure by a whopping 80% by avoiding the Dirty Dozen. So what is the Dirty Dozen? Your apples, strawberries, grapes, celery, peaches, spinach, sweet bell peppers, nectarines that are imported, cucumbers, cherry tomatoes, snap peas that are imported, and your potatoes. So what's your Clean 15? Avocados, sweet corn, pineapples, cabbage, sweet peas that are frozen, onions, asparagus, mangoes, papayas, kiwis, eggplant, grapefruit, cantaloupe, cauliflower, and sweet potatoes. There's your list.
And Define Nation, we are back, and I am passionate about youth and children's nutrition, and really giving kids the nutrition they need to develop. Children are our future, and I'm absolutely committed to that topic. And with that being said, let's talk about the benefits of these omega-3s for the development of our future generation, our children, and specifically cognitive development. If you wouldn't mind taking the ball on that one.
Sure. Well, I mentioned earlier that I feel like fish oil is really a womb-to-tomb proposition, and, in ideal circumstances, a woman would be taking fish oil all along, and she would just simply continue to take it during pregnancy. It's so important during pregnancy because, that is the time when the nervous system, the brain and the eyes and the spinal cord, the entire nervous system begins to develop, and when it's doing the most amount of development is in utero, and then in the first few years after the baby's born. And so these are crucial times to make sure that that baby is getting adequate omega-3 fats, because that is going to get incorporated into the tissue of the brain, and is going to be absolutely essential in how the nervous system develops, which is so far-reaching for a child, for cognition, for focus, for behavior, and possibly studies say even IQ. Studies also show that when mommies take fish oil in utero, babies have fewer allergies after they're born. They have immune systems that seem to be stronger. They get less frequent colds, and when they do get colds, they don't last as long. So the immune system effects of fish oil on babies and on children is far-reaching, and then the impact of fish oil not only on brain, nervous system, eye development, but then on how that affects behavior and mood and attention and focus has been shown to be extremely important for all ages, toddlers, children, adolescents, and then moving us into adulthood. I mean, it's just, and I would say, before the break we were talking about, your passion about people getting things through food versus supplements, which I agree. But boy, when you've got little kids, try to get them to eat a serving of fish every day, right? It's hard enough with adults.
Right. So, no, you're absolutely correct.
This is where the supplementation, is so great that we have, we have accessibility to high potency, clean, what's the word I'm looking for? Now I'm drifting. Non-rancid oils, right? Fresh, clean, pure oils. And sometimes they're even safer than eating fish because, let's face it, our fish supply isn't the best it could be either. So
absolutely.
Fish oil is important in that regard.
No, it absolutely is, and I think that it is one of those supplements, like you said, that a lot of times it is safer and it's easier to get in, and the form can be more pure, and you don't have to worry about the extra contaminants that are in fish, especially farm-raised fish. You look at the statistics on salmon now, and what kind of contaminants are in salmon, and it's just it's scary. Now I'm talking about farm-raised salmon, obviously, but and this leads us into a topic that I want to make sure that you cover in the show, and that's choosing the right type of supplement. And I guess maybe that's what I alluded to earlier. And I do take a fish oil supplement every single day, again, because I'm aware of the cognitive issues that might face me going forward. But I think a lot of people are confused on how do you read the label and what is a quote unquote good versus bad supplement. And I have my own biased opinion on which I'm we're going to talk about in the prize pack coming up here, but for this week. But can you elaborate a little bit on good, again in quotation marks, versus bad, and picking a good supplement?
Sure, and there's a lot of there's a lot of brands out there on the shelves. I mean, I get confused when I walk into the health food store, and everybody's packaging is so pretty, and it's just it's hard to choose. I think one of the most confusing things about fish oil is that you can see a total amount of fish oil and the amount of milligrams associated with that. But what you really want to know, if you want to, let's say, Danielle, you're a perfect example. You are taking fish oil because of the studies that have been done on its impact on cognitive function and age-related dementia. And those studies have all looked at EPA and DHA content. So if you want to take fish oil to get the therapeutic benefit that has been studied, you must ensure your EPA and DHA content. So I tell everybody to turn their bottle over. Forget the total omega-3 part. Just look at how much EPA and how much DHA is in there. Add it up. Look at how many pills or how many teaspoons you have to take to get that. And then, based on what your doctor says, figure out how much you need to take. Now, for me, for a generally healthy adult, I'm going to recommend about 1,500 milligrams a day of EPA and DHA. That number is going to get higher or lower depending on diet, other health issues that are going on, if you've got extra weight on you, if you're a smoker, if you have previous heart disease, etc. But that's a pretty good number there, between 1,000 and 1,500 milligrams. For me, what's really easy, because I want people to get a potent dose, I want them to know that what they get is going to be clean of chemicals, that it won't be rancid, that it will have been manufactured in an oxygen-free environment so that it stays fresh. And so for me, the easiest thing to tell them to look for is Nordic Naturals Ultimate Omega, because it's in pretty much every health food store. It's clean, the quality is exceptional, and in 2 capsules, they're going to get almost 1,200 milligrams of EPA and DHA combined. So it's just so easy.
Well, and you just read my mind. I was about to say, and the one that I recommend, but I do believe that Nordic Naturals does have the absolute highest quality product that is out there. I think the third-party testing that they have done speaks for itself. What other brand does that? Because they're not hiding anything. They're very transparent, and finding transparency in the nutrition industry is very difficult because of the unethical practices that go on. And I think that speaks to the type of company they are and the type of product that they're putting out there. And when you talk about, DHA and EPA fats and not having those extra filler fats that are in there too, and, adding up and saying, okay, what is the dosage on the front? What is the percentage that I'm getting? How good, I guess, of a source am I getting? And so you just took the words right out of my mouth. We agree that that's the one that we do take. And as you heard the good doctor agree with me, they are the premier source of fish oil that is on the U.S. market today, possibly the worldwide market. And we are going to make sure that you have the best quality products to give a test drive, per se, of everything from taking care of your pets to taking care of your children and your own cardiovascular and cognitive function health. And I'm so happy to be partnering with them, and I know that once you guys try these out and get into that routine of getting that overall wellness into your body for long-term health, you will agree with both the doctor and I. Of course, our friends from SoyJoy and Zevia are also in on the prize pack that you guys will be getting. Remember that question to win that prize pack is going to come from the interview that Dr. Shuuny and I had today. So again, Amiee, I thank you so much for joining us and breaking down this very complicated subject. Maybe we can have you on again at some point in the future and we could break down one of these individual topics a little bit more. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure, and I would love to come back and talk with you again anytime.
Sounds awesome. Well, Defy Nation, until next time, remember, motivated, dedicated, and highly recommended. Bye-bye.